right there. And I'm so happy to be in your home tonight. Thank you for letting me share. I had quite an exciting time this week, and actually it was at a funeral. And one of our dear friends passed away, and but there were a lot of people there that said, I watch you every week. And I said, you do? And I had no idea. And some of them I knew, and a lot of them I didn't know. But they said, you know, I watch you every week. And I felt so encouraged, and I have some that have written in, and I don't recognize your names, but I just want to say welcome. And I just hope that we can say something that lifts your heart today to a new level. God bless. Ruth and Polston. I just want to share something with a portion of your Bible that we probably don't even read very much. And I don't know, I didn't till a few years ago until the Lord said, hey, slow down, there's an awful lot in here. And when I took my time and began to spend time with it, I said, boy, so you don't expect that you're going to find some steps to answer prayer in the life of Jonah. Would you have thought that? Well, anyway, we're going to talk about steps of prayer that Jonah found. And guess where it was? In the worst circumstance of his life. Usually we find the best stuff when we're hurting the most. He's in a problem because he can't die and he can't live. So we're just going to talk about it in a minute. So here we go. Now, as he starts out, he's on the run. He's a runaway. He's a preacher. And God had an assignment for him that he didn't like. Yeah, you know, preachers can get that too. And this was one that he said, excuse me, Lord? No, he said, I want you to go to Nineveh. Now, when you just say that word, it sends out an alarm because the Syrians had fought them and did despicable things to Israel. And now he's telling him, I want you to go speak to Nineveh and tell them if they don't repent in 40 days, I'm going to cut them off. Nineveh. He said, Lord, you must have made a mistake. But all the time in the back of the mind, he says, I know God's a God of mercy, but that's too much for me. No, God. So he thinks God is local. It's kind of silly, isn't it? He thinks God's back there where he came from, and that was in Israel. No, God's not local. God's everywhere. So anywhere that he runs, he's going to run smack dab into God. And so that's what he did. So he runs away. Well, now what he didn't figure in, that God has everything working for him. You see, God owns the wind. He owns the rain. He owns the animal world. He can make anything work for him. And he certainly did for Jonah. So anyway, he gets on a boat, pays the fare, Nothing. Money is no object when you're in rebellion. So anyway, it starts out. And the first thing that God does, he's asleep in the hold of the boat. And he doesn't know that God has sent a wind. God sent the wind. And the wind is crashing, and the bows come down, and the boards of the sides of the boat are beginning to come apart, and finally they couldn't clear apart. And so some of the men that were in charge said, go down and find out who that is that's asleep down there. What's the matter with him anyway? Wake him up and find out who he is and why he's asleep. So they go down and find out. And so as soon as he heard, what was going on up board while he's asleep and running away from God, then they said, yep, he said, I'm your problem. You're our problem. What do you mean you're our problem? Who are you? Where do you come from? He said, I'm a prophet. My name is Jonah. I'm a runaway. I didn't want to go do what God said. And he said, you're not going to get any relief yourself if you don't throw me overboard. That's how bad. He did not want to go to Nineveh. That's pretty bad. And so they said, well, why don't you call on your God? And he said, no. He said, I want you to throw me overboard. He said, I'd rather die than go to Nineveh. So they said, we'll call on ours. And they did. And they even called on Jonah's God, and they said, we're sorry about this. But he said, if we don't throw him overboard, then we're not gonna make it to land ourselves. Boat's leaking, everything's broken. So they picked him up, reluctantly threw him out. But now look, here's God. God has everything working for him. He said God prepared a fish. You see, God tailors himself to what our needs are, whether it's positive or whether we say it's negative. God knows how to reel us in. He does. If we're on the run and we think we can outrun him, yeah. Yeah, God knows how to tailor himself. And so the fish swallowed him, naturally. Swallowed him. And now he's hemmed in on all sides. And that fish is carrying him. He don't know where he's carrying him, where he's going, nothing. And so he said, my goodness, I can't die now and I can't live. And you know what he said? He starts giving us these wonderful nuggets of how to pray. So he said, out of the belly of hell. Here's the first one. Out of the belly of hell, I cried. You know, he called his situation hell. I guess he thought it was. Have you ever been in a situation like that? I've had a few times. Yeah. But it was in that situation of hell, he said, I cried. Now, it's the first time that he has sincerely called on Jehovah God. So when he called on God, he said, out of the belly I've cried, and he heard me. Jonah, how do you know he heard you? He heard you. Now he's beginning to act like a prophet. And he said, because I called on him, and he heard me. Sometimes, you know, we only pray half a prayer. And the half a prayer is asking. But life is made out of the negatives and the positives, the up and the down, and the in and the out, and the power and the shortage. It's all in the balance of life. So he knew that if he would call, God would answer. Because the Bible said, everyone that asks receives. Now here, you see, you have to take God as his word. I mean, either he meant it or forget about it. We're just better off not to pray if we're going to pray half prayers. Half prayers do not get answered. So he said, I prayed. He heard. So that's step number 1. Get the other half of your prayer in there. All right, what's the next one? He said, all right, he said, yeah, he began to identify who it was that put him there. He said, thou, it is thy waves. It is thy billows that are splashing over him. He began to recognize that God had taken the initiative in his life, and here he is a runaway. A lot of good that's going to do. And so he begins to say, thou hast caused me, put me in the deep. It was your waves that did it. You are responsible. Now he is ready to identify his problem. And his problem is he caused it. So it was God now that sent the waves, but it was Noah that caused him to cause them. So if you happen to be on the run tonight, just remember, when you get into trouble, it's the Lord's waves. He loves you that much that he would send his waves. So that's number 2. You've got to identify who sent those waves. Yes, who sent them? All right, the next one is, he said, I am cast out of thy sight. All right, that's easy to say. But yet he makes the following statement that is just surefire, wonderful way to remember the third answer to prayer. I am cast out of thy sight, yet will I look toward thy holy temple. What he was saying, I will be preaching again. Jonah, give me a break. How can you say, yet will I? He said, because I know God now. Because I'm back in focus. And he got him focused and he said, I know I'm cast out of your sight. I know that I'm down here and it's good for the kill. I know that this ocean is full of fish just like this one that swallowed me, but I know all those things. Yet will I. So he became his own prophet. And sometimes you have to do that. You have to begin to believe and to prophesy over yourself. Yet will I. If you're going down for the kill and say, I believe this is the last time we're on, say, yet will I. Boy, that's good. That's good. I hope you remember that. Because some of you out there are going through some pretty heavy stuff. And remember, I am cast out of your sight. He didn't deny the facts. But God is greater than facts. Yet will I. Now the next one he said, this is number 4. I remembered the Lord. You know, while he was a runaway, he was running away from God. He didn't remember the good old days. He didn't remember when he got up there and recited the Psalms and the people would go out and say, good job, Jonah. He encouraged the people. He remembered the Lord. And you know, there's something about it. When you're getting in focus, you begin to remember. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, remember when that happened? Oh, yes, I remember seeing that day that I preached. Oh, yes, I remember. And something happens, and you begin to process the good things of life. So now he is remembering the Lord and the good things. And the fact that he believes he's going to be back there with his people sometime again, and already prophesied to that extent. So now we've had 4 of them. So I like this. He starts preaching to himself. And you know, there wasn't anybody else to talk to. I'm sure that he and God were having, this is proof of it, that they're talking, and the way that he started preaching, he said, it's just like he pulled something out of his reserves or something. He said, they that observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy. You know what? He said, I've been so problem conscious that he said, I've been running from my own mercy. Here I am serving a God of mercy, a God of love. And yet, I have been observing lying vanities. And he said, you know, I don't believe I'm going down for the kill. So I'm going to stop observing it and indulging it, rolling in it, and masticating it, just talking it over and over in my mind. Because fear will take over when you are observing lying vanities. Now he was able to call those things a lie. Now what is faith? Faith is calling the things that are not as though they are. Oh, you said that's crazy talk. Well, then they're all crazy in Hebrews 11. Because they call the things that are not as though they were. That's number 5. All right, here he is now. He's down in the bottom of the ocean. By this time, the fish has done its work. And the fish is sick. He wants to get rid of it. When God is through with the problem, he doesn't need the fish anymore. So that sick fish went up on the land and vomited up Jonah on dry land. I hope you can remember those 5 things, because they could be your surefire ticket out of whatever the hell he talked about, the circumstances, and you could say also, yet will I, yet will I. Thank you for letting me be a part of your world tonight. Bless you. Have a wonderful work. Ruth Ann Polston, The Life That Wins.